designed.
So let's bring this up to present day. I think, John, the outcome you're vectoring at sounds like a pretty inoffensive outcome, right? Hey, let's save taxpayer money. Let's unify the equipment and the material that's being used across the joint force. Check. Got it. Where we start to get into the funny business is when you think about where we are in this moment of technological advancement, which is, hey, instead of just the big and the exquisite and the long-term planned platforms, now we're talking about lightweight, we're talking about medium, small, we're talking about UAVs, we're talking about attritable systems, things that we can get shot down or that the cost to kill is not terribly high. And so therefore we need lots of them. And by the way, we need to adapt how we make them because the enemy is going to adapt how they kill them. And so we got to do that very quickly. And so speed really becomes one of the defining features of, I don't know, modern warfare, something like that. And we get this memo out of the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth's office this week. August 20th, we get a new memo focused on the joint requirements process to accelerate fielding of warfighting capability. John, Dave, what happened in this memo to the JCIDS process?
We blew it up to start with.
Yeah, John, I'll let you go first here.
I think you touched on the important things there, Noah, right? Like, number one, and you can look at you can read between the lines. And I think the KOP, right, the key operational problems piece, I think that's a super thing, right? And that kind of harkens a little bit back to the rapid acquisition days of old, where like joint urgent operational need statements and urgent operational need statements drove the train of, we have a new problem. We just found out about it yesterday. We need a new solution. We need it tomorrow. Like, we need to close that gap and get something downrange ASAP. That is not what JCIDS was designed for. JCIDS was designed for buying the next Bradley fighting vehicle, not the next attritable drone that can now react to the new battlefield that has fiber optics on it. So if we can credit one sort of element in the zeitgeist for this memo, it is exactly what you said. No, it is, technology is now moving much faster than it did 20, 40 years ago. And so our processes need to react and be able to orient to match that. So the COP piece, I read that as like another part that JCIDS did not do particularly well, and that I hear from government folks all over the place, is like getting requirements, both little r and big R requirements, from the operational force up to the decision makers where they can actually go buy stuff is slow, right? It goes through so many different bureaucratic and hierarchical layers when it filters up from the field all the way up to the buyers. It's slow. And so you don't get that quick turn. So if we have these pressing key operational problems, there's two things there. It's one, actually getting those problems from the field, and then two, very quickly pushing those up to the top. Oh no, fiber optic drones are a problem. We need something for that. We can find out about that quickly. The other piece that kind of jumps out at me that I was very surprised about was the like quick reaction, basically the budget wedge towards the bottom of the memo, right? We're going to have this essentially a management reserve. We're going to have unspoken $4 out there that we can use to basically fill in the valley of death for key capabilities. That's something that Congress and comptrollers have not been very keen on in the past, right? I'm a budgeteer by trade in the past. Like, you couldn't just have $100 million slice in your budget for whatever comes up. We don't know what it's going to be, whatever comes up. No, when you create a program objective memorandum and a budget estimate submission, you're calculating that stuff down to the gnat's ass, right? The last penny. And so having just a slice of, we're not sure what we're going to spend this on next year or in 3 years when the POM comes due, but we want to have some flexibility there. That's not been a thing in the past. Pragmatically, you need to have extra money laying around that is not tied to what Dave said, a program of record that isn't already called for in buying the 150,000th end item for 2 years ago's requirement. You need to have some free cash laying around to be able to pour it into one of those new capabilities to get into the field. So those are two really big things. And I think that RRAB, right, where you have, here's a stack of problems. We're going to take the top set of those problems and we're going to throw cash at them to get them across the goal line as fast as possible. Like, those are big things that jumped out at me the most. That reorienting the JROC, the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, from being you must come up to the top of the mountain and get all the stars to bless off on your thing before we go by. Now it's more of a coordinating body-ish rather than a must pass the check mark bucket. Those are the big things that jumped out at me. I don't know if Dave has a different take.
No, I think very similar. I mean, kind of maybe new words, but different take on it. So the RRB, we replaced the JROC with another big council. And so there's going to be another knife fight for funds because we established this flexible funding or this innovation funding, or as the memo calls it, the Joint Acceleration Reserve, that management reserve. What it does not say is the DoD budget is going up. And so if you're carving out, that means you're carving something else out. This is a zero-sum game. And so are we buying less tanks, or are we going to shut down some radio program, or who's losing money? There's always a loser here. Somebody is in trouble here on the budget side. This Joint Acceleration Reserve is going to cost somebody their cash. And then that decision authority, it pulls it up to RRB, but it also pushes down a lot of decision authority to the services. So it gives them the freedom of the JROC is no longer going to be on top of them. So now the services are going to have to figure out how to do their own requirements. I think they'll be able to do that. But once again, it's going to be a new knife fight. And those services, inter-service, is going to be knife fighting for their own funds. So once again, winners and losers. And now it's just who are the power brokers. And so that's kind of like the implications for the services and the vendors. And then at the very last of it, it talked about the workforce. And something about, I expect this to free up billets or people that can be put somewhere else. And so does that mean we're about to see requirements people in the military being somehow or another rift? And it probably wouldn't be a rift, it'd probably just be a no new hire, and it would be natural attrition to where we're just naturally going to have less requirements people in our civilian force. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out. But the bottom line of this is JCIDS is going away. But JCIDS was a disciplined, rigorous process. We now have a disciplined, rigorous process. And so we'll learn how to live with it, or the DoD will learn how to live with that. And then on the vendor side, the small businesses, large businesses, the collective we will have to learn how to deal with it.